afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Wowhead Weekly. I am joined as ever by Wowhead site manager Peculiar. How are you doing this week? Good.
Super.
Doing well. Yeah, my name is Olivia Grace, and we're here to talk about everything that's been going on in WoW and on Wowhead this week. So first up, we normally start off with talking about the new data bill, but Perk and I had a week off this week.
It was very exciting.
It was great. We finally had a week with no data bill. There's been a build every week. Gosh, like every week forever, it feels like.
Yeah, several months at least.
Yeah, so possibly something of an exaggeration given that we've only been in alpha for so long, but it definitely feels like there's been an awful lot of builds coming out this week. So we don't have our usual new data to talk about. We do have more information, of course, from the Warlords beta and a couple of interesting tidbits from the news as well. But the first thing we want to talk about this week is we've literally just had some patch notes 20 minutes before the show. They went up on the official site. So the Warlords of Draenor beta patch notes. Now, Perk, it's also worth mentioning here, isn't it, that the patch notes don't necessarily tie up with exactly what we're seeing from our data mining and from the beta builds.
Definitely. There is a disconnect. So what you see data mining is what the devs are working on, and the patch notes are on a different schedule. And I know that devs and community interact, but they don't line up. There's so many builds that Blizzard puts out, and no one can really predict what exact build will be on the server.
Yeah, exactly that. So as far as we know, like the patch notes would be sort of the latest position where they're at and the kind of forward-thinking way that the devs are looking at things, whereas the builds would be what's actually ending up on our servers. Because I mean, it's a bit of a guess, but let's say for every 10 builds that they make internally, we actually end up seeing maybe one on the servers. So it's hard to sort of say like this is definitely going to tie in, this is definitely going to match up. So take it as you see it. But there was a couple of interesting changes. Perk, you were telling me about something that had changed with the warrior stances, right? The absence of shifting?
I'm not sure if that was just a typo or just a formatting change, but they removed most of the stances section, and they just said that when you use an ability that's not for a certain stance, you automatically shift stances. And then they removed a whole list of abilities that said required a certain stance. So that's a bit unclear. Maybe I'll message them on Twitter, but the end result is that swapping to stances, knowing what abilities you use in stances, is being simplified.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good thing. Yeah, it's a really good quality of life change. You're exactly right. For, like, if you don't know about how stance dancing, as it used to be called, warriors had certain abilities they had to be in certain stances for. So you would have to use defensive stance with a shield equipped to use shield block back in, gosh, I think it was Kata or mid-Kata when they phased that out. Yeah, so a little while back. But you had to then, all the people ever did was set up macros. You had to, macro yourself, so you went into defensive stance, used your ability, and then you take yourself back out again at a later point. And to reintroduce that gameplay, a lot of warriors were kind of annoyed about it because nobody likes having to make a ton of macros and use a ton of macros to stance dance within these, to use these different abilities. So, like, it's a good compromise having them automatically switch you as well.
Right, I'm just confused why they removed the abilities underneath it. But I guess we'll tweet them and we'll see what they say.
We'll have a look at it, yeah, definitely. There's some interesting sort of communication gaps in the patch notes sometimes, and we do our best when we post them on Wowhead to actually investigate the things that Perk and I find confusing and just figure out what's actually going on so that we can communicate clearly to you. There are a couple of other interesting changes in the crowd control section as well. So when you're looking at these patch notes, be very aware that not all of your class changes are actually going to be in the class specific section. So for example, this week we had a change to Paladins, which wasn't mentioned in the Paladin specific section, to an ability called Evil as a Point of View, I believe, and which has now been replaced with Blinding Light. So that's certainly an interesting change, given that
because that was gone at one point, right?
Precisely, yeah. Blinding Light was precisely the kind of instant cast AoE CC that they were talking about removing for Mists of Pandaria. They were very, had this big CC post, and that was taken out, and it was given even as an example of the type of CC they wanted to remove. So I'm certainly surprised to see it back in. Who knows what'll happen there? Maybe it was an error. Maybe it was just something that they're trying out.
Maybe it's data mining that will change what it actually does that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, precisely. And maybe they're adding a cast time to it for everybody. Like, maybe that's as simple as that. Maybe that's what they're up to. And also there's been another change to the Shaman ability Tremor Totem. So if you haven't been paying attention to that, the Shaman Tremor Totem has turned from a reactive CC break, so a thing that you can cast when you've already been CC'd, into a preemptive CC break, so a thing that you have to cast before you get CC'd. So right now, on live servers, you get feared. Perk's playing a priest, or a warlock, more realistically.
Yeah.
And, and she fears me on my shaman. I can then Tremor Totem. So I can see, I don't have to worry about keeping an eye on perk for fearing me. I can just Tremor Totem whenever I get feared, and it'll break the fear and it'll all be fine. With the recent change in Warlords, they're actually making it so that I would have to predict perk fearing me and Tremor Totem in advance of her doing that. So I'd have to watch.
That's a bit trickier.
It's definitely trickier, yeah, for sure. It's definitely trickier. I mean, I'd have to watch out for you casting a fear, or if you were playing a priest in PvP, I'd have to watch for you running towards me and think, oh, I think she's going to psychic scream me, or her friend who plays healers is going to psychic scream me. And, I then have to cast it preemptively to prevent that happening. And what they've done now is they've actually increased the duration of Tremor Totem as, I suppose, a way to kind of counteract that change, so that you do have a bit more leeway of casting it when you didn't need to. I think that that's a good change, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Like, I feel like they're kind of getting towards the end of the mechanics changes and moving more into the actual tuning phase.
Yeah, I think that's definitely happening as well. I think that the Grimoire of Synergy and the Claws of Shirvala were two sort of the last major changes we'll see. Although I do believe one of the devs tweeted some teaser Warlock abilities that we haven't seen all of them for, but we've seen some of them, like Grimoire of Synergy.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a result of that, people are starting to guess about release dates and all that sort of thing. But, we don't know. It's still up in the air. Maybe
we'll see. A ton of data that we need to cite, like all of the raid items, and the dungeon journaling game is totally broken. Yeah. Empty.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't it completely empty for at least a couple of instances still?
Yeah, it's for pretty much everything in Warlords except for one boss who drops a pair of shoulders, and apparently also on challenge mode difficulty, which I confirmed via Watcher that that was a bug. There should not be challenge mode drops. So the one item you see should not be there.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. The actual strategy sections, at least on our data version of it, are quite complete. And I think there's a fair few bits in the game as well. But yeah, the loot section, you're right, is completely empty. So obviously since last time we've been testing a lot. We've had a bit more time. If you remember last week we were complaining bitterly about not having had enough time to test it. So we've actually we've been running around, we've been looking for flight points, we've been testing everything, we've been looking at all sorts of cool stuff. So do keep an eye on Wowhead, and we've got more and more content coming as ever. We keep delaying blogs because we've got too much news. So one of the things I know that you've been looking at, and I've been looking at a great deal, Perk, is Garrisons, the big exciting feature for Warlords. So the PvE server, the level 100 PvE server came up with this most recent build, and with it added the ability to boost your garrison. So
yeah, that was so nice.
Oh my goodness, yes, it's so good. It's such a good change. So they can now be boosted up. They can't be boosted up on any of the other servers that I've found. Is that right?
Yeah, only the level 100 PvE server, and you have to go outside of your garrison's main entrance, and you will see this NPC called Garrison Ford there. And he lets you do a variety of things. You can ask him to boost up the garrison. You can ask him to learn a bunch of followers. You can get more resources repeatedly, so you can build buildings and tear them down. And you can get your garrison up to level 3. And most importantly, you can learn all the blueprints for level 1 and level 2 buildings, all of them.
Yeah, that's actually huge.
The catch is that you have to learn the blueprint outside of your garrison.
Yeah.
You can't click on the book inside because for some reason it doesn't work. And I know that's confused a lot of people on beta. I've been answering questions on that.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely sort of like, well, obviously it's a cheat system which won't be implemented in the final game, so it's not a huge surprise that they haven't like spent a ton of time bug fixing it. But it's definitely, there are some buggy elements. Like my first 3 boosted garrisons, I couldn't use the architect's table at all. It was only on the 4th one that it actually works. So there's definitely some bugs in there, but it's a really fun way to allow us to actually test things out and really, really see the full complete
we have seen a lot more for sure, which is really nice.
Yeah, finally. So what have you been building? What have you been putting in your garrisons?
So for Wowhead, I've built and destroyed everything just to get pictures. Some of the Alliance buildings don't have their furniture in yet, so you have a lot of floating vials or like enchanting things or it looks a bit funny, but I have been able to, access as many vendors as possible, and there's some really cool buildings in there. The coolest thing by far is the Dwarven Mora Bunker Armory, and when you hit level 2 on it, you unlock a special transmog vendor who you can turn in scraps you loot from Orcish clans around the world. That was not implemented yet, but I could see on the vendor that they were selling that. And you can turn in these scraps for really unique transmog gear that is reminiscent of what the various Orc clans in Draenor wear. So cloth wearers, for example, can look like the Shadow Moon Orc clan which has this sort of very sort of like purple and like mystical blue shoulders, while plate wearers can look like the Blackrock clan, which is this black plate with interesting red glows, and some of the sets are quite revealing.
Yeah, it's definitely quite revealing. I was quite surprised too, like the plate
on
set
both races too. That was a surprising thing.
Yeah, for sure. Like the plate set, the Orc clan plate set, to me just reminded me of Deathwing. Like it just looked like something that Deathwing should be wearing. But the others were all sort of like, wow, that's quite skimpy. So, like I don't mind.
Up with the Blackrock being different.
Exactly, it's obviously hotter in Draenor than it looks, or something along those lines. But they're still really cool sets. Like I still really like them. I like a lot of the sets that we're seeing coming out of Draenor. There's a ton of good gear in there that actually has good looks to it. So I'm excited to really get into Transmog and start building some unusual sets.
It's really nice how that set's BOA too, because you can send it to an alt that doesn't actually have the building. You can just send them over if you have no bank space, just give them to your bank alt. So that seems to be really nice.
Yeah, that's a really cool touch. I wasn't actually aware they were BOAs. That's really awesome. You could also see a video and a post on Wowhead with all of these transmogs in them. So if you want to check them out, see the revealing transmogs and the Deathwing plate set, you can check all of those out on Wowhead and on the YouTube channel for the video of all the sets. We've also heard about some fishing updates from Els Angling, right?
Yeah, that was really cool. I have not had time to level my fishing all the way, but apparently if you hit level 700, max your fishing out, and you hit the level to build your Garrison fishing building, you can embark on a quest line to recruit Nat Pagle as a follower to your Garrison. And that sounds super interesting, and even some humorous bits where Nat Pagle is totally confused to find another version of himself in another area. And it seems to be a really neat touch. Some of the other buildings seem more straightforward, but I'm glad that one has some character to it. And he seems to be a pretty powerful follower, as he's level 100 and also rare quality.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds really cool. Like I'm looking forward to seeing what we get out of more special followers like this, more sort of specific characters that we can get into our Garrison. And we've also heard like there's been some interesting stuff coming out about the menagerie. So I saw one in your Garrison the other day. You've got the battle pet menagerie. Finally, at last, yeah. So how does that work?
Yeah, so you have to unlock your Garrison by doing special pet battles with critters that are in your Garrison. Like in the herb garden, there is a carrot that you have to fight. And just sort of around the construction, there is a rat you have to fight, for example. And then there are different elite pet teams that you can fight every day in your menagerie. And so far, it seems to be changing every day, so there's as much variety as, say, the Celestial Tournament at this point. And there's also vendors that sell different pet stones to level your pets, as well as pug costumes for your perky pug. And we recently data mined the week before additional pug costumes for like Yip Saran or Mad Alchemist with these crazy goggles. So I am really excited to see what the pug vendor continues to sell.
Definitely, that sounds fantastic. And like, it's a really nice thing. I wonder how long they'll continue to be different for, so that you can, I'm sure we'll have a guide up for these on Wowhead, so don't worry. It'll be there. But there's definitely a bunch of really cool stuff in the Garrison. Like, for me at least, I was just struck by how amazing I've got both, obviously, and Perk has as well. The Alliance and the Horde Garrisons leveled up, but for me at least, and if you want to call me an Alliance fangirl, fair enough, but the Alliance one looks fantastic. It looks so good. It's like, it's so cool. It's got that sort of Stormwind architecture, and it's got real height to the buildings, and it just looks amazing. I personally am a huge fan of it. But the Horde one less so. The Horde one doesn't look nearly as cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Alliance Garrison, I think, looks really cool, but the buildings aren't fully decorated yet, but it still has a lot of character, while the Horde buildings, when I look closer, the exteriors have a lot of interesting designs, like on the roofs. Like there's like totems for one building, there's like blood elf gemstones for the jewel crafting one, but they're not fully decorated yet, and for some reason they just look they look similar from far away, even though I was surprised at the amount of detail when I saw them close up.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly found that they sort of seem very, and I think it's because, at this expansion I've played a lot of Horde. I'm usually more of an Alliance girl, and we've been raiding Orgrimmar now for coming up on a year. So it's all looking a little bit samey around the same area again and again, and maybe it's just that I'm a little bit bored of the Orcish architecture.
Yeah, I know at one point they were saying they wanted to have buildings that were actually different than the Orcish architecture. Like, even if, not that you would have a choice between different building styles, but that there would be some that had a different, aesthetic to them.
Yeah.
So I thought that they'd be more pronounced than, the roof having like a blood elf tint but yeah, who knows? Maybe they'll still be designed further. Some of them seemed incomplete.
Yeah, I hope so, definitely. So the other thing that we're looking at this week, we've got the capital faction hubs have had a bit of work done on them. And obviously we're now not talking about the beloved Caribor and Bladespire. We are, unfortunately, talking about the ones in Ashran. But they've had a ton of work done on them, and they're looking bigger. They're definitely looking bigger.
I kind of like them.
Yeah.
Any sort of new area is fun to explore. They do look a little bit similar to my Garrison, though, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. It's good because I can see what the buildings look like when I don't have to preview them. And there are some interesting touches, like there's, gazebos and some, interesting trees and lighting. But it does look a bit similar to my Garrison, and it would be nice to see something reflecting the culture of Draenor more. I don't want to feel like if my Garrison is work, I don't like feeling like I'm visiting a city that is also work or that I'm directly responsible for.
Yeah, exactly. It seems sort of odd. Like the story reason they gave behind the Ashran faction hubs is that you want to go out and build your own sort of base rather than moving into someone else's city. And much as whatever your opinion of that story thing is, it kind of makes sense along the lines of that story to have very reminiscent architecture of humans and of orcs. But it's a little bit boring. To me, we've seen an awful lot of that. And I think the Garrisons, it looks cool. Like, it's nice to have the human and orc architecture, but I'd love to see a bit more variety. And I think the same applies here. It's just very sort of generic, and it's kind of not very exciting. And I think the problem is that Blizzard is going to have with these is people are eternally going to compare them to what if we'd had Caribor and Bladespire, in which case, we'd have had really different architecture, we'd have had something a bit more exciting. So while everyone's always going to be critical of the architecture, I do think that I'm really going to hope that these are going to be built on, and I believe we saw on Twitter that these were actually going to be built on every patch, that we'd see more and more coming.
I did not see that tweet, but that is really good to know. I mean, on my end, I think that the term capital city, people assume that is the same as a hub. But I think in this case, they're trying to be used differently because they're not nearly as robust as your usual capital city. Like, Vale of Eternal Blossoms, you have this, gorgeous, everything's gilded. There's, flavor NPCs. You can, buy lots of gear there. There's a bank. There's all these things, while a lot of that functionality is in your Garrison now, and this feels a bit smaller with just, the profession trainers and a few gear vendors. Yeah. So, I think people are, when they think city, they expect something very grandiose. But it's nice, but it feels more like a developed
Definitely.
town.
Yeah, definitely. It sort of feels to me like, and I mean, it's accurate for a group of people who've just arrived in a strange land and are trying to establish an initial foothold. And that's like, this is their first effort to build a base. And, with the comfort that they hopefully will be built upon in subsequent builds and patches and so on and so on. And we're definitely not seeing the finished article right now still. Like, there's still more coming. It was mentioned in a blue post just yesterday, actually, that there's still more. They're still working on that. They're still getting towards what we're going to see in the final build. So fingers crossed from me, at least, for a few more sort of different race-based buildings. Like, I'd love to see some undead architecture in the Horde section because,
definitely.
I love undead architecture. That sort of spooky gothic look is just so cool. And I feel like, although obviously it's had a lot of coverage in previous expansions, I feel like it's been really underdone recently, and it's something that I miss. I'd love to see something like that. I'd love to see some Draenei, obviously. My God, here we are on Draenor. Let's have some Draenei.
Together with them.
Yeah, exactly. Let's have some of those guys in the actual Alliance section as well, or at least some indication that that's what's coming. That would be really cool. I do feel like we've also had a little bit of confusion about the hubs on Ashran and the actual bases and the PvP and the PvE and the problems there.
You're not going to be flagged in your... Even though it's the same name, Ashran, they're two separate areas.
Exactly, yeah. So
different zone IDs.
Exactly that. So they've been trying really hard to clarify this on Twitter, and honestly not doing the best job. We're not wishing to be unkind, but it's hard to clarify things in 140 characters here and there and repeated tweets and that sort of stuff.
Especially with tech stuff, people, sometimes the tech is very different than what you actually see.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to explain these things.
Yeah, and it's so open to misinterpretation on Twitter, especially when you're truncating what you're saying so much. But one of the things that they've clarified recently is, they were not within this past week either, this was a couple of weeks ago, was that they're actually using, obviously they've got this technology which Helinka tweeted about back in March or April even, that was relating to how Ashran is instance, but you don't have a load screen. So you're not actually going to see a load screen when you move into this instance zone, but it is instance, just like a battleground is instance, just like a dungeon is instance. Right. And that instance is what's going to be CRZ'd to bring in a balanced factions group. So say, for example, hypothetically speaking, you are on an alliance heavy server. Your server, bizarrely, is 80% alliance and only 20% horde. I'm sure they exist, I just don't know.
That was my old server, actually.
Oh, really? Well, there you go. What was your old server called?
It was a loon. So
okay, so you're on a loon. Here you are on a loon. You're on Ashran on a loon, and you go into Ashran, and all of a sudden you're blended with Illidan, which is a very horde heavy server. And so you've got, you know, Illidan and wouldn't actually have them because they're PvP. But yeah, so you've got these two servers working together and they're all fighting in the main area of Ashran and they're like driving into each other's bases. And it's important at this point to note that a base is not the same as a faction hub. They're two separate
base is like
villages.
A PvP objective hub area, like
precisely
starting area in like AV.
Yeah, exactly. So in AV, you start off in the little bits up the hills. I forget exactly what Trollbane Hall is the Alliance one, but I can't remember what the Horde one's called, unfortunately. But they're up the hills. Those are the bases. So base is a PvP map term for the point where you start from. Like in Warsong Gulch, you've got the Horde base and the Alliance base, which are the places where the flags are. And it's much the same on Ashran. The bases are not the same as the faction hubs. They're entirely separate. And the big thing to note with this instance stuff, which is why I brought it up, is that when you move from the base to the faction hub, you're going across an instance port. So you're actually hitting an instance point there, and you know there's no way that people who are CRZ'd in, unless they're in an invited party on your server, can actually make it onto your server from that city, from that sort of base into the city. Yeah. So, and not to mention the fact that, as Perk says, you've obviously got the different flagging. You don't have the PvP flags applied in the cities. You do in the bases because they're within the instance of Ashran. And, you know, it sort of riles me a little bit when people are like, oh, it's forced PvP. They're exactly the same as the shrines are right now. They're exactly the same as the shrines. So they are, you know, there's a PvP availability there, but unless you flag yourself, you're not going to be PvPing. People can come in and kill your NPCs.
You know, that's really funny that you mentioned the shrines, because I remember really early on in MOPS beta, there was this world, like, PvP event that, like, briefly showed up on the map, and I think it was hinted somewhere that they wanted to try that in Veil of Eternal Blossoms. So, you know, that could have, what people are thinking about with Ashran now could have actually happened in Mist of Pandaria.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's like, it's worth remembering that the way they're currently set up, and who knows if this will change. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them make these bases Sanctuary on PvE servers at least. So Sanctuary like Dalaran or Shatrath, where they're actually Sanctuary, where you literally cannot PvP. You can try all you like, but you just can't. It's just, it's mechanically impossible within the game in those zones which are labeled Sanctuary. Wouldn't surprise me to see them do that at all. But for now, within those zones, it's really important to remember that they're not PvP flagging you on a PvE server. And not to mention even that, but Blizzard have put a ton of effort in this expansion. We learned about this at the PvP Summit back last, whenever it was, back in
June, maybe?
June? I want to say
no,
June.
It was August.
No.
August was PvP.
Yeah,
it was PvE.
I think. Yeah, I can't remember exactly when it was, but I was at the PvP Summit with Helinka and a bunch of other PvPers, and they were telling us about how they're making big changes to flagging, which they've just started to hint at in Blue Post. So, for example, the way that flagging works now is if someone walks into, sorry, excuse me, let me get the right way around. So someone's a DK, offensive DK, so Perk's a Horde DK for some reason, and she puts a Death and Decay on the ground. I walk into it, and like then that's sort of an initial aggression, so that can actually flag people PvP. You know, if you heal someone who is PvP flagged, you become flagged for PvP. And what they're doing in Walls of Draenor is they're actually taking huge steps to take all that back, so that you really have to PvP flag yourself. You have to go into a menu and PvP flag yourself in order to be PvP flagged. So they're taking huge steps away from anything that allows you to become involuntarily PvP flagged.
Yeah, I think that's really good, especially on places like the Timeless Isle, where, you know, to find some people, you have to resort to all these tricks to surprise people into getting them flagged without them noticing.
Exactly, yeah. So, like, if I was to wander around PvP flagged and walk into Perk's AoE, like Perk's AoEing a bunch of mobs, and I on her road with her fan of knives, and I walk into that, she just attacked a PvP flagged player. like, you know, it's not nice particularly, but it's something that a lot of PvPers have done on PvE servers, is just to get themselves flagged, like get the people they want to attack flagged by accident, and then you can attack them. And it's really good to see Blizzard taking away all of those methods. I mean, even as someone who loves PvP, I don't think anyone should be forced into it. And I kind of resent the people who are saying that these hubs are forced PvP, when they're kind of going to reasonable lengths to stop that being the case. But yeah, so that was my rant. What else we got? It's the cities. You've noticed here, like, about people calling you something weird, haven't you?
Yeah, so I've heard there's like a little quest to explore the city. I think that you just have to sort of see all the buildings. It's like a little tour. And they're like, oh, Commander, you're here. And I know that Blizzard has been moving towards this narrative where, you know, you are a known hero of the Alliance or the Horde. And, you know, you really are the commander. But it just felt jarring in this context because you know, questing in Draenor has reminded me of my experiences playing in Burning Crusade when the storyline was very different, where people were just sort of unnamed heroes that were, you know, banding together to sort of accomplish great things against the odds. So it felt a bit sad in a way to go to this city and have everyone know me personally as the sole hero, because I sort of preferred the game the other way, where it felt sort of more creative that way. I had more flexibility in thinking about my character. And it seemed to make more sense. Like, if I go away from the game for a bit, you know, if I'm a boosted character playing in Worlds of Draenor, it feels weird to have people calling me the commander because I haven't really done anything. Or, you know, because this is an alternate timeline, why are people thanking me specifically?
How do they even know you? Like, if it's an alternate timeline.
And it just feels weird in a very social context because, you know, you're trying to interact with your friends. Hopefully there will be other people in this hub area.
Yeah.
And it just seems very strange that everyone is this hero. It's like everyone is shouting at once and is super important. It doesn't seem as nuanced. So I felt a bit nostalgic when I was going into this hub and being like, oh God, everyone knows me here. Is this like my Garrison? I just want to, you know, relax and mingle, and now I still feel like the center of attention.
For sure. Yeah, like, it makes perfect sense in the Garrison if everyone calls you commander, because that's the outpost that you've created and you've sort of built that up, and that's kind of, obviously you had quite a lot of help. That makes sense. But it makes more sense there. But I agree that on, like, Ashran, it is really odd how they're calling you commander. Like, to me, you're helping in a battle. You're not the commander. You're not commanding it. You're not steering it. You're not driving it tactically. If anything, you're just a soldier who's coming along to help.
And that sort of ties into my sort of complaint that Ashran looks similar to your Garrison. It just feels like you're responsible in a way that this is about you. And I like when the expansion feels a bit more escapist and you can, you know, visit other cities and feel like you're relaxing in a new environment, as opposed to this is tied to my Garrison, which I am the commander and I'm in control of. I'm in work mode doing this.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think it's like a knee-jerk reaction to the complaints which came up in Cataclysm that you never really were that involved in killing off the enemy, certainly in Dragon Soul?
I mean, it's an interesting mix because Cataclysm and the quest revamps, I think, were the first time we really got this hero narrative when questing. Instead of just sort of being lost, you know, collecting wolf ears and all sorts of things in quest zone. You were, you know, saving Manethil Harbor from being flooded, and then you were, you know, like pushing back Ragnaros and Ashenvale, and, you know, pretty much like bringing world peace to every zone. And so I think that if people didn't feel involved in Dragonsoul, that was sort of a shortcoming of the raid's narrative and how that was set up. But I do think that Cataclysm was all about like you in this very sort of center role, doing things single-handedly, and I think that's why some people felt a bit strange or nostalgic going back and doing the quest in, you know, well-loved zones where they felt that they were exploring and shaping their own narratives, and now this felt very sort of like forced on them that they had to follow one track and have this one sort of very hero cartoonish role.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's definitely some real truth there. Like, to me, it always felt odd that, you know, my early experience of WoW was very much the sort of, you know, I'm a small person doing my thing to try and help, not like, I'm not the hero, I'm not Superman, I'm not Batman, I'm just one of the people who's trying to help out and contribute. And it made it easy for me to sort of envisage my character sort of going, no, actually, you know what, sod this, I'm just going to go do Battlegrounds. And, like, that was kind of fun to me to have that sort of aside and not have to feel so, like, oh my gosh, I'm the hero. And that is kind of tiring and wears you down a bit. But I don't know, it's sort of, it's interesting, and I hope that they change it.
It's a work in progress. Maybe we'll see different buildings or, you know, more NPCs. We've data mined a ton of NPCs that haven't been found yet. So maybe they'll have some cool flavor ones in the faction hubs.
Yeah, we've data mined a ton of PvP community people and other community people. It would be really cool to see some of those guys just wandering around the faction hub. I'd love to see that. But moving on, we've actually also got, obviously, since last time, we just had the build go out, and we hadn't had the time to really look at the 2 new zones. So we've got Spires of Arak, and we've also got Nagrand available. Now, Perk, I know you've been doing a ton of questing, and okay, so this is the first time we've really had any spoilers in this show. So we're going to talk about some spoilers. Now, if you don't want to hear spoilers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the description when you can come back safely, okay? So right now, pause the video, look in the description, find the timestamp, and you can just click into that and go straight to the bit where we've stopped talking about spoilers. But if you're okay with spoilers, carry on. But just make sure, don't listen to this if you don't want the spoilers, okay? So we're doing our best to warn you here. But Perk, okay, so if you're still watching this, you've listened to that warning and decided that you still want spoilers. So it's on your head if you get spoiled. Right, so Perk, you found some spoilers.
All right, so the major spoiler in Nagrand is that Thrall has some sort of battle with Garrosh, and there's a cutscene that's not implemented yet. And then when everything fades back, Garrosh is now encased in rock and is now dead. So that is the major spoiler.
That is a pretty major spoiler. That is a pretty, and honestly, Perk told me about this when she found it, and I was just like, oh my god, we posted it up on Wowhead. With some images, so you can go back and find that. Obviously, huge giant spoiler. So again, if you're still watching this, you just got spoiled, and it was your own fault. And so it's so cool. I'm just like, oh, thank God he's dead. They killed him. Yes, finally, we can stop. I was so annoyed when I found out he got away. So annoyed.
Yeah, I don't know if the rocks are magical and they'll bring him back, but essentially, Uriel is fighting enemies in this scenario in Nagrand. She comes across Garrosh. You and her fight him for a bit. He's hitting for a lot. She's healing for a lot. He then threatens her and says that, we're done playing, I'm just going to kill everyone. Thrall rushes in. They sort of bittersweetly say that they're old friends, and then they decide that they're going to, conduct this ritual, I guess, somewhere in the brand. And then you fade to this cutscene, which is a placeholder, and you come back. And you've got 8 major sort of leaders talking about how they want to proceed with, handling the corrupted clans in the future. And nearby, there is Garrosh's corpse in the rocks, and you can click on Gorehowl to relive the cinematic.
Wow. So you really, I suppose it's possible that they could reincarnate him or something if they really wanted to, but does it give you any clues as to where this, that's kind of early. I'm really happy about it, don't get me wrong, but that's pretty early to kill off one of the sort of well-known protagonists in the villains in this story. So does it give you any clues as to where we might be going next?
Well, there's also some interesting storylines in Nagrand. We get to meet Azuka Blade Fury, who is the leader of the Warsong clan now, and much has been made of her because with all the promotional materials, we haven't seen any sort of female characters. And now we do have a female warlord. And from what I've heard, when I tweeted about this, the lead quest designer was saying that they want to do weekly quests, the story quest, where you get to learn about characters like her. So I think we'll be seeing a lot more of her showing up in various instances. And also based on what the characters were discussing, including Agra, who is also very cool that she's present because we heard at BlizzCon that she was not going to be there. And all the different characters are talking about how Garrosh has corrupted a clan, or now these clans are sort of helping each other out, and there's, they're building the iron docks and all these sort of harmful things on Draenor, and they need to he's created all these threats, and they have to sort of clean up the huge mess he made.
Okay, so we're kind of cleaning up after Garrosh again, like we were in Mists of Pandaria. It's kind of interesting, though, that that's happening so early on. I wonder if we're going to see more interesting, different enemies introduced, maybe a move away from Garrosh and the Iron Horde coming in 6.1 and later patches. I mean, honestly, I'd be really happy to see that. Just a step away.
I'd be cool to see more sort of Black Temple remixed as well.
Yeah, maybe that's why we're not in Karabor, because they're planning some crazy thing going on in there.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Who knows? That would be really exciting. I mean, obviously, this is pure conjecture. This should not be taken as any kind of statement of anything that we found out. This is just us hypothesizing about things that might be cool. Okay, so moving on more about the Spies of Arak and Nagrand. There's actually some other stuff about the Alliance side of things. We've got Admiral Taylor making an appearance again, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, so spoilers, but more minor spoilers for this. So at least on the Alliance side, Admiral Taylor, who was a character you met in Vashir, who was present through the Cataclysm and then the Mr. Pandaria campaigns and Lion's Landing, he has arrived on Draenor before you to set up a garrison, but things go horribly wrong because of some people that have mutinied against him and turned him in, and you come across his garrison, which is all ghosts. And it's really poignant. There's, you get to interact with various ghosts. They give you special consumables. They have special dialogue. You hear about like all of his loyal friends. It's a really well done quest line. And it is very sad at the end because when you do finally sort of release his spirit, he's like, oh, we've actually quested together, for these expansions, and I'm glad, we ended our time together. And then like a statue of him pops up in your little garrison outpost.
Aww,
so that is quite
so
touching.
sad.
I know. I want to see
so
what the whole
sad.
is,
Yeah.
but I thought that was pretty well done. And there's also been some interesting Arakoa lore going on. Unfortunately, that questline is bugged, but you do sort of learn about like Tarok in this alternate version and how he was like very powerful and just and good. And then at some point, his close friends turned on him, I guess similar to Admiral Taylor, and he was corrupted or weakened in some form. But that's when the quest series breaks on me.
Oh, well, that's a shame. Well, that'll be certainly interesting to see coming up in future builds, so we can maybe get some more information on that for you. All right, so if you've just rejoined us, you've just missed all the spoilers. And we're now going to go back to talking about Garrison some more. So we've actually, obviously, with the new zones, we spoke about this briefly with Gorgrond and Talador, but there's actually obviously the Garrison outposts. Now, these are kind of, to me, they seem like maybe a slight compromise because you're no longer able to reposition your garrison in any zone that you want. But instead, we've got these things called outposts, which are sort of, I suppose an outpost is a perfect description of it. They're little sort of offshoots of your garrison, which give you somewhere to call home in a foreign zone where you're not usually there. And along with the outpost, depending on what you build there, and it's only one building per outpost, right? We haven't seen
any one building per outpost.
Right, so those give you different buffs in different zones. So we've got the inn and the trading post in Spires, and we've got the stables or the gearworks in Nagrand. So what gives you what?
So, in Nagrand, if you're building the stables one, you get this really neat sort of zone-wide buff. It's disguised as, you summon a Talbook and you can always ride him in combat. So essentially, it's a zone-wide speed buff, and it just looks like you need to have this visual appearance of being on a Talbook in the zone. So I used that for a bit, and then I switched to the Gearworks, which was more of shooting things down to hit your enemies, which makes sense. The one in Spires was more interesting because the inn provided an instant hearth and you always have rested XP, so it's not really useful at max level, but as you're leveling you get more XP there. And what I believe was tied to the trading post was something called like a smuggling run, where I believe a specific vendor would pop up every now and then. So I want to try that out more, but the difficult thing is that it costs a lot of gold to switch your garrison outpost. So I need to make some more pre-mades and send the gold.
You send some gold around. Fortunately, it's relatively easy to make gold in the beta. Just make characters and send them and delete them and make more characters. But there's also those sound pretty cool. There's the potential to build some of these things in your garrison back home as well, isn't there? So you can actually, like I was able to build a gearworks in my garrison, my main garrison, as well as in the outpost in Nagrand. So it's sort of interesting to see how that's going to interact. Like, are these, because they just seem to provide buffs for the zone. Like they don't.
Well, if you finish the quest line for the building, you get a special book that serves as currency for upgrading your garrison.
Right.
And you can turn that book in your faction hub. So I think that on your own you could unlock the level 1 blueprints for both buildings, but if you don't have that book, you can't upgrade to level 2. And I'm sure that you eventually can get that book, but it might cost a lot of gold if you didn't go down that quest line.
Yeah, for sure. But it's sort of, there's different zone-specific buffs that you're available to you from those buildings within that zone specifically. So it's different to have a Gearworks there than a Gearworks back home in Shadowmoon or Frostfire.
There's and like we covered, like for the Spires one, like there's one that's really useful for leveling, and then probably, one that you probably wouldn't want at all. If
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So moving on to other cool things about the two zones. I was really excited to find this, and it's Perks mentioned it as well. The Ring of Blood returns. Yes. I was so pleased. It's one of my favorite things to do, and like I became kind of well known on the server back in EU for being that person who'd always help you with Ring of Blood.
Oh, that's
I just
awesome.
really enjoyed doing it. But yeah, so there's Ring of Blood. We've seen some new bosses in there, or we've not seen so much of it so far?
Well, I mean, it is. My gear is not really awesome, and they're all group things, so it's just this, free-for-all fiasco. But I did see Azuka Blade Fury there at one point.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool. There's also and you found the black market auction house, right?
Yeah, that's very interesting. By the Ring of Blood, it seems you got your sports, and then you've got your money-making operation off on the side.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, it's really cool because I mean the Ring of Blood in this form has a lot of ogres around it, and actually to fight in the Ring of Blood, you have to like kill ogres for their like tickets. But some of them are bodyguards for the black market auction house, and they're these, big muscular ogres with these bow ties.
That's so cool. The ogre bow ties were so funny. You posted that screenshot. I was like, that is amazing. They look hilarious. And so what are you seeing? Are we seeing anything cool in the black market auction house on beta?
Yeah, we're actually seeing a lot of new things there. I've got a few characters parked on different servers. So we were seeing a lot more trading card items. So the trading card game ended last year, which means that all of the, there's no more cards being generated. The prices for things are getting more expensive if you decide to buy them on, a place like WoW TCG Loot. So we've been seeing things like the Spectral, Kitten Cub. We've been seeing, more of the other pets or sort of, vanity items that previously weren't there. We're seeing the UDE point tabards, which was an old TCG program that's been gone for several years, and these tabards have totally skyrocketed in price. So we've now seen these tabards on the auction house. And what really surprised me is that the Swift Zulian Tiger and the Raptor from the pre-Cataclysm version of Zul'Gurub were up there. And I can't find the tweet, but I'm pretty sure when people have asked about this in Mr. Pandaria, the devs were saying that they didn't want to put these mounts there was no way of getting them back. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah,
now they, are coming back.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the one hand, it's cool because it gives you a way to get them. But on the other hand, it's kind of surprising. Like, I always felt that the black market auction house always had items which you had another way to get hold of them within the game. Like, it's not been true for 100% of items for sure.
Yeah, there's a few mounts like the 10-man tier 7 Proto Drake, which required people getting immortal. That was taken out, so that's been back. But they never put the 25-man version in. But
yeah. There's definitely some interesting balance to be going on there, but it's really cool. The ogres, honestly, it's worth going over there just to see the ogres. Yeah, they're so funny.
They're so cute.
Yeah. So part of what we do this week in the show every week is we talk about what's new on Wowhead this week. So last week we had some sad news about the Blizzard thing breaking our beta key giveaway, but this week we have happy news. We've heard back from Blizzard, Perk.
Yes, they've personally messaged us as well as posted on the long thread of people complaining that their armory is down for various reasons. And all of the issues are fixed, so we will be back on Monday with another big beta key giveaway. And if you're new to our giveaways, you can once again verify your characters with the armory, or you can do the achievement and then your armory will update and everything will be nice and simple again.
Hooray! Yay! I mean, it's sad that it broke at all, but I'm really glad they fixed it, and we can now go back to giving away huge quantities of beta keys in return for you guys doing awesome stuff in game. So stay tuned, go over to Wowhead on Monday, check out what we're going to be asking you to do. It's going to be something in game, and you're going to have to do something, and we're going to give you beta keys. Hopefully, obviously, it's only a chance. It's only a chance to win. Entry does not guarantee a beta key. We don't have that many. If we did, we'd give you all a beta. I promise. But yeah, other exciting news this week for Wowhead is we actually hit 100,000 followers on Twitter, which is great news for us. It's really cool. We're really, really thankful for all the support. So thank you for following us. It's really, really cool. So we've actually done a big giveaway to celebrate. So we're giving away beta keys. We're giving away some $20 Battle.net gift cards. And obviously, if you haven't seen those before, I can get one. I'm making noise, but I'm going to get one out of this bag because I went to Best Buy and bought them. So here they are. This is a Battle.net beta card giveaway. Blah. This is a Battle.net balance card. Let's try that again. So it's for $20, and you can't see it here because it's not scratched off. But on the back, there's a little number, and you scratch it off, and obviously we'll scratch it off and send it to you. We're not going to send you this. And then you enter it, go onto Battle.net, and it gives you $20 to spend on whatever you want. So if you want to buy something on Battle.net, that's an easy way to do it.
Hearthstone cards,
mounts. Yeah, it doesn't have to be Warcraft.
Yeah, anything.
It can be anything at all. So they're pretty cool. And we've also got the Rocket Chicken pets from WoW TCG Loot.
Yeah, they're really generous and
yeah, they were really, really cool. So we're really appreciative of them for that, particularly as Perk was saying, with the TCG having ended, like these things are getting even more valuable. So them giving us this stuff is even more generous. And they've also given us a really, really awesome mount. And
well, yeah, it's a really awesome grand prize because it is the X-51 Nether Rocket.
Yes.
And the code for that actually lets you redeem 2 mounts. It's the blue version, which when it first came out was meant to go at slightly lower speed, and then the red rocket. So with all the changes Blizzard has made since they've come out, essentially you're just getting 2 awesome rocket flying mounts for 1 code.
Yeah, which is really cool. And if you look at the background here, you can see, like, between me and Perk, behind me and Perk, just over Perk's head as well, you can kind of see we're into red rocket here at Wowhead.
Yes.
We like red rocket. So it's a very appropriate prize, and it's a really awesome prize. So we're really, really super grateful to WoW TCG Loot for giving us such awesome things to give away. And obviously, we're really grateful to you for following us on Twitter. So go down and check that post out, enter the giveaway, and we will be drawing that on Monday?
Yeah, Monday.
So check out then and see whether you won. So we're just snowed under with giveaways this week. We're going to be here for half an hour just talking about the giveaways that we're doing. So we've got a Hearthstone iPad giveaway going on as well. We've got, obviously, Curse of Ashran was launched, and we've got the Plague Quarter that's come up. So in celebration of that, we've got an iPad minis. We've got 2 of them.
Yeah, we've got 2 iPad minis, and they're bundled with the adorable Hearthstone pillows.
Yes, and they really are adorable, those Hearthstone pillows. And Noxie did some fantastic art for us. We've also got beta keys to give away with that giveaway, and we've even still got more of these Battle.net cards to give away.
Yeah, so you know, if you don't want to actually pay to get the Plague Quarter unlocked, you can, you know, put this Battle.net card towards that.
Precisely, yes. There's an awful lot you can do with those Battle.net balance cards. That's another giveaway. Again, go onto the website, check them out. And after you've entered with that one, there's actually one of those ones where you get lots of different entries to win, right?
Yeah, it's like you were using Locker Dome, which lets you do lots of social media options, you know, like Facebook or Twitter. You know, just like load up the app and then follow the different instructions. And the really cool thing is that the first time you enter, you have, you know, these 5 options you can do, but then every day after that, you can get 2 more additional entries if you do the Twitter option again. So you have to use the app to do it. You can't just, you know, log into Twitter and, you know, tweet Wowhead or Hearthhead to enter. But if you do it via the program on the contest page, you will get extra entries. We will register that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can tweet it. You can go through the app again and again and again and get more entries for the Twitter side of things every day. So finally, in our giveaway news this week, we should just call this a giveaway section in future.
I know.
Like, all of our news this week is giveaways. Perk and I drew our beta key giveaways yesterday. Well, you did yours as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we both got them pinned. Yeah, there's those are done. So thank you very much to everyone who entered. I was really having fun hearing all your Zul'Gurub stories, because that was my favorite 5-man. It was really fun to hear all of your stories from old and new Zul'Gurub. I heard a really hilarious one about people wiping, which is that happened a lot in Zul'Gurub.
Yes, that definitely did.
And what was yours?
Mine was Dire Maul. You know, all my characters are night elves. I really think that the Chandrila are fascinating. I'm really sad the rep was taken away.
Yeah.
When they did that whole revamp. So yeah, I had a lot of people lamenting that you know, they like that faction as well as, you know, sort of very grumpy, smart, you know, knights.
Yeah, for sure. So this week we're doing another one, another Twitter beta key giveaway. Sorry, not Twitter. Another weekly key giveaway. So what we're asking you to do this week is slightly different. It's not Twitter related. So what we're going to do is get you to let us know in the YouTube comments, subscribe to the channel. So make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, and obviously we really appreciate people doing that, so thank you very much. Leave a comment in this video, so in the comment section of this video, telling us your favorite topic that we talked about in the show and your Wowhead username. Why are we asking for your Wowhead username? It's so that we can message you, because YouTube's messaging is basically non-existent. Like, it really doesn't work very well at all. So make sure that you leave us your Wowhead username so that we can get in touch with you and get you your beta key. So let us know your favorite topic we talked about in the show, whether it was talking about spoilers, whether it was Ashran, whether it was anything that's coming up. Let us know what you thought you liked the best, and obviously we're looking for topics. And then let us know your Wowhead username, and we will give away some keys to you then. We're doing 5 for this as well?
Yeah, let's do 5.
Yeah, let's do 5. There we go. So 5 beta keys. Comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure that you put your Wowhead username in the comments. Contact you. Right, that's the end of the giveaway section. That's all. Only those 4 giveaways.
Yeah, we have a bunch of data things going on, but they're in a very sort of technical stage yet, so we don't want to put you guys to sleep. When we have when we do the flashy part of it, we'll definitely talk about it.
For sure, absolutely. So we've also had some character model updates this week. The latest artcraft revealed that we've actually got a lot more variety coming to faces and facial expressions with Warlords of Draenor. And personally, I was so relieved to see this artcraft.
Yeah, I was really happy too. I'm like, oh, this explains why my character looks the same. That's because like the face actually is the same and they can't render the expressions right now.
Yeah, exactly. I was so relieved to see it because there's definitely been some like I know I complained bitterly about the undead female, my ex-face mage not looking quite the same and not being quite right, and
and my character was always surprised, and it seemed like when I cycled through other faces they were surprised too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's constantly surprised and weird looking mages and all sorts of weird stuff going on. And like even when you look through the faces, obviously the undead was a good example of one that changes a lot because there's big, like the missing jaw on the male models, for example. That's a big change. But they did look quite samey, so I was really, really happy to see this post. Really, really pleased. But like I kind of like part of what made them so difficult was that they had to actually like rebuild the structure. They're not just painting the faces on with textures anymore, are they?
Yeah, it seems that under the old system you could more easily show a face model because you could just like paint the expression on. But with all this more complex tech, it's not so simple as just painting something on. So they have to like actually redo the geometry of the face behind it, which obviously is a huge amount of work.
Yeah, definitely. And they were sort of showing us how the geometry was very simple, and they've actually talking about the male dwarf model. Like in the old model, he just had his teeth painted on his upper lip, the real sort of snarly, like crazy looking face. And in the new one, they had to actually build teeth for him because he didn't have that expression and the ability to do that. They were building it in, so it's a lot more complicated. I mean, like there's definitely some pros and cons here. So I mean, I think the part of the issue is the understanding and the lack of understanding that players have of how difficult this actually is. I mean, I think a lot of players don't realize that the old models were genuinely like they were the same basic structure underneath, just with some very clever artwork on top to make them look like they had all these amazingly different faces.
Yeah, one thing I'm surprised with though is that they were talking about how in the blog they originally wanted to release character models over the whole course of the expansion, which I was a bit confused because I thought that they wanted to just do the original vanilla races at launch. And then they said on top of that, they at one point wanted to release the updated models, but just with that same base face geometry and add expressions over the course of the expansion. And while that could make sense from a workflow perspective, I just think that that would have been really bad for players who, you know, if they're saying like, why was my face taken away? Like, I don't understand this tech. How come, you know, this race next to me has a model, but I don't?
For sure.
So this was the first I heard that they wanted to release the character models with this sort of
the one face. Yeah, exactly. So
and I'm glad that I heard about it after the fact.
Yeah, definitely. Like I'd never heard that either. So that definitely wasn't just you who had that impression. Like I'd never heard anything about them spacing out the models and the faces through the course of the expansion. I'm really glad they went down this route because like imagine, you know, you go and pick out the new model and your character looks completely different. And I get attached to characters and I know Perk gets attached to characters and, you know, you want them to have that face and that feeling that they've had for, you know, 10 years now almost. And it's, you know, there's a real sort of like link there. And it kind of goes against what they were saying about how they were really trying to get the soul of the old characters into the new characters.
Yeah, I mean, the face is basically the soul. Like, I mean, people get so excited when they just added like a new hairstyle.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Like it's not really high-tech art. It's just it could look really low-res and pixely, but people just love stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I'm really glad. I again had also not heard about that choice, but I'm really, really glad they went against that. They decided to actually make sure that the different faces were being done justice and that better expression was available for the launch of the expansion. In bad news for models, particularly for Horde players of Blood Elves, and they're a pretty big proportion of the Horde, they are delayed until after launch. So the new Blood Elf model will not be coming until after launch. It's a shame. Like, don't get me wrong, it's definitely a shame. I only have one or two... Wait, no, I'm lying. I have 4 Blood Elves. So I have plenty of Blood Elves, actually, it turns out. But, I mean, I feel like there's maybe been... Based on what we've been just talking about with the faces, I feel like there may have been a trade-off there between, okay, on the one hand, we can do all of the, like, let's call them the body model. You could do all the revamped body models at launch, but the face reworking, which we've just been talking about, will have to wait. Versus, we are going to do all of the faces, and then we're going to hold off on one of the models. I personally think that option B there is a better option. Like, I'd rather, like, obviously, like, there was someone commenting on Wowhead when we had released the news that 13% of all Horde players are Blood Elves. So obviously that's, let's say, assuming a perfect world that Horde is 50%, that's around 6.5% of the total player base who are not getting updated models. But the other, oh my god, maths, 93.5% of the, sorry, 83.5%. No, yeah, I was right first time. 93.5% of the player, I was so bad at mental arithmetic. The rest of the player base are getting updated models with faces. And obviously if you're playing a Worgen or a Goblin, then you can't include that. But yeah, I think it's a good, if that's the reason, if that's what's happened, and I suspect it might be, I think that that's probably a good shift, although I can completely understand why Blood Elf players are very, very distant.
It could also lead to a lot of confusion if, you know, you're coming back after a break and you're like, oh, cool, there's updated models. Let's see what my character is like. If you logged on and your character was, you know, only really half updated, you know, you're like, okay, well, this, you know, I've come back after 2 years, you know, it looks mostly different. That's done. Like, you're not going to know that, oh, hey, in 6 months, your face is going to totally look even awesomer.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think drawing the clear cut, okay, you know, like, this whole bunch of models is 100% done, and, you know, Blood Elves are not done yet is better for communication than, well, you know, everyone's done. Like 50% done.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's much better. And also I think, you know, for the people who are, you know, if someone is looking to change their character's appearance, like, imagine how annoying it would be if you changed your appearance away from a face that you weren't a huge fan of. And then that face then got changed, and you're like, oh, actually, now I love that face.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's a paid service, which people would be shelling money out for. And I think it would be, like, actually kind of a bad idea to have that constantly shifting.
Yeah, I want a refund. And
I want a refund, or I wish I hadn't done it, or I want to swap back to the old face, I like it now, or, you know, there's a lot of problems with that. There's a lot of problems with having things that aren't consistent and are changing all the time. Like, if you make a change and someone hates it, at least they can adapt. But if you keep changing things over and over and over, it's harder to sort of, like, adapt and change what you're doing in order to fit what's going on in the game. But I do feel the Blood Elf pain, I do. And particularly I know that, and I think that, like, obviously Draenei are the sort of comparison, the sister race on the Alliance side. But there's quite a few Draenei in Mansion. I can see why they picked that model to do over the Blood Elves, perhaps. I don't.
Yeah, because I mean, like, all the NPCs that you interact with, but also get that new model, and there's so many Draenei.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of feel like all the people who are saying, oh, why did they pick the Draenei over the Blood Elves? I feel like the reason is that we're on Draenor, and this is a Draenei-focused expansion. So there's that. But I completely get why people are sad, and I really, really hope it'll be 6-1 that the Blood Elf model comes out in. So fingers crossed for that.
Maybe we'll see that at BlizzCon. Who knows?
That's a good point. Maybe we'll see it then. And we're still waiting for the Troll art craft as well, which I hope is coming soon. I believe Chris Robinson tweeted that it was coming up.
Yeah, I think next week they're hoping. So we'll see how that translates in Blizzard time.
Fingers crossed. I hope it does. So I know I'm excited to see that, because I think some of the Troll models are honestly some. So looking forward to that for sure. And in really exciting news, in very surprising news, in fact, and there may be a hint of sarcasm in the particular news segment. In incredibly surprising news, we've already heard that the Alliance Chopper is coming to World of Warcraft. I was surprised. Perk, were you surprised?
I am so surprised. I was lamenting the fact that this glorious steel creation would not be mine.
I can see how surprised.
One to my mount turtle.
I can see how surprised Perk is by her sort of lackadaisical expression. But yeah, so it's coming. It's coming into the game. So do we know what you have to do to get it? Do you know when it's coming? What do we know so far?
Well, it's weird. We know it's coming soon. We know it's costing gold, a lot of gold. Bashiok tweeted, you know, think like mammoth amount of gold versus 1,000 gold. Yeah, it's not for free. But it seems weird how the Horde bike is free, but you have to log in before a certain period of time.
Yeah.
And the Alliance bike is not free, but it seems to be stuck on a vendor, which means that you could log in way in the future and get this bike.
Yeah, it definitely seems odd, and I was thinking this myself as well. It's sort of like, so is the Alliance bike available for gold forever, but if you didn't log in between, well, not now exactly, not the 1st of August, but like between whenever it was released in July and September 30th, like that was your chance to get the Horde bike. I kind of suspect that either they're kind of bound up by some legal thing because they said free, so they have to give it away for nothing. and in-game gold maybe counts as currency in some kind of legal way, or we're going to see it come onto a vendor as well. So I would be surprised. Like, if that's the case, although there obviously is going to be a chunky gold cost to get the Alliance bike, like, that kind of means that the Alliance effectively win a longer term bike, if that's what ends up happening. Which would be kind
more visibility. Go to the bike vendor versus log into Battle.net.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be very odd if they went down that line. But, you know, it's completely spoiled our April Fool's joke.
Yeah, I was going to totally build this item that was going to be the Alliance chopper and have our devs pull up a chopper model, you know, maybe like the one from Wrath, and say, can you attach this 3D model to this fake item page, and you know, tag it as being Alliance faction only. So that was going to be April Fool's joke. We thought that we'd maybe even hear about the Alliance bike sooner, like maybe BlizzCon or a mid-patch thing, but we kind of thought that, you know, with the nature of reality TV, that it would end up existing anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I strongly suspect that by the time we even saw Azeroth choppers, the whole, like, I'm a bit of a cynic about reality TV, so maybe I'm being unfair, but I felt like the bikes were built, the in-game bikes were probably built, and that they would be not dedicating dev time to something that wouldn't show up eventually.
Yeah, I can't picture a dev making a 3D model of this elaborate mount not to use it.
Yeah.
Especially when everyone is overwhelmed with working on character models and raid sets and everything else. I cannot see them devoting, you know, free or wasted time to something that could not possibly
wouldn't end up in the game. Exactly that. So we may have been a little sarcastic when we were saying we were surprised, but it's good, like, you know, for those people who love the Alliance bike, you can start saving up your gold, you can start working on it. We don't know, we were hypothesizing in Wowhead's chat earlier that it might end up on the black market auction house, but it seems more likely that based on the wording of the Blizzard post, it's actually going to be on a vendor, a normal vendor, rather than on the auction house. But you never know.
Yeah, with the Mammoth Mount parallel.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously we do know that it's only going to be rideable by the Alliance side. So there's not a sort of horde, like, it's not one of those things where you get the horde one for free.
And then it transforms itself.
Yeah, exactly. So do bear that in mind when you're considering purchasing this mount in game, particularly as it's a lot of money. So anyway, every week we are going to be looking at some viewer questions, and what you need to do to get the viewer questions to us is to tweet us, or you don't have to even tweet at us. You just need to tweet with the hashtag for the Wowhead Weekly hashtag, which is hashtag WH Weekly. So W for whiskey, H for hotel, weekly in every week. And so you can tweet at us with that hashtag, and several people have done so. Thank you very much indeed for your questions. So the first question that we're going to hear from is from Bendak, who is a hunter. And he says, haven't heard much about scenarios in Warlords of Draenor. Do you think they'll be as prevalent as they were in Mists, especially with no Valor points? Have we heard much about scenarios?
We haven't. We've heard that the scenario tech is what's being used for sort of like these fluid group quests where people can group up and do like a scenario quest together, like sort of an elite quest, even if, I don't know, there are different parts of the quest chain. But we haven't actually seen any scenarios. So I wonder if Mists of Pandaria was like an experiment for these more elaborate social challenges, solo challenges, like, you know, Proving Grounds uses the scenario tech. When I was talking about the spoilers before, part of that was in an instance scenario.
Right.
So, yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think that it would be good to have more small group content. Maybe they've decided that because they want to do more dungeons frequently, there's less of a need for scenarios, because in Myst we got not very many dungeons. We only got the launch batch, and then we got scenarios every patch.
Yeah.
So maybe they're thinking that if they just bring back dungeons and devote, you know, the scenario 3-player scenario resources to the dungeons instead, that's a better compromise, because then you have more loot options and you have slightly more people involved and more challenges you can do around that.
Yeah, definitely. And I certainly feel like that I could definitely agree with Perk wholeheartedly on the assertion that Myst was very experimental with scenarios. We saw scenarios used in very many different ways in Mists of Pandaria. And personally, for me, the most effective use of scenario technology, or at least the most enjoyable, let's not say effective, maybe that's the wrong term, but the most enjoyable use of scenario technology was certainly the solo scenarios that you did for things like the Isle of Thunder. And I found those really fun. I sort of felt like a sort of solo challenge, like a Brawlers Guild thing almost, but instanced away. And sure, I didn't like repeating them. Like, they got really boring after the 10th time. But that's my own fault for having so many. That it's sort of like, I think that that was a really good use of scenario tech, and I'm happy to hear that it's being used more for quests and for like solo content within Pandaria, and so Pandaria Draenor. And I wouldn't be as sad at all to see them really scale back, like to swap the scenarios, the three-person scenarios, for more dungeon content. And I do think that one of the major uses for scenarios, particularly further on in the expansion, was really more just to grind out valor points. A quick way to grind out valor points with heroic scenarios. And the removal of valor points, as Bendak says, is going to be a big blow for that, because then, you know, did people really do them because they liked them?
Or you just got a random piece of loot with random stats. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I don't know if they were really the best sort of, like, they were an interesting experiment for sure, and I think the technology has been used in some really cool ways. I just don't think that the sort of default, here's a scenario, was a really cool way to use that technology. I mean, maybe it's principally because I play healers and tanks. I don't play a ton of pure DPS characters, and when I do play them, they're for PvP. So I didn't have much of an additional use for the three-man scenarios. And I would not be surprised to see a lesser focus on them, or maybe the scenario technology being repurposed into more solo content, or enabling you to do cool epic quest lines, like a class quest line that's very sort of scenario focused.
And like we know, we data mined some legendary objects and a few quests, so maybe there'll be another cool solo scenario. And we know that updated proving grounds are coming too, which is, you know, a really elaborate scenario.
Yeah, exactly. That's really good use of the scenario technology. All right, so next question comes from Archdruid Aurora. Olivia Grace, what are your thoughts on there being no new BGs at launch, like Blizz said there would be? So this is a funny one. I was thinking about this question. I looked at these questions earlier today, and I've been trying to think if I actually thought that I didn't actually think that there was a new BG coming at the launch of Mists.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, and I'm not sure either. I mean, like they've said so many things, and things have changed.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought that I was under the impression, perhaps mistaken, and, you know, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I was under the impression that we would be getting some, just not at launch. And
I was thinking that too.
Yeah, I even seem to recall discussing this with Helinka on Twitter, saying, you know, are we going to be...
It was. So we didn't really promote it, but I mean, there were some data files floating around of, you know, like, oh, here's a battleground in the data, and you know, I think in 5.4 there was some data mining tied to, what was it, like the defense of the ancients, some sort of
the defense of the ale house.
Yeah, the ale house. I think that something like that resurfaced at the very early start of alpha, and I think Holinka was quick to shoot it down and be like, no, they're like, this is for a battleground that is not coming.
That's right. There was definitely, there's a defense of the ale house, which he was, again, like you say, very quick in dismissing. There was also the troll 100v100 battlegrounds.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
In early on, and maybe that's where that confusion is. I mean, personally, like, obviously I love doing battlegrounds, particularly rated ones, and I'm not that fussed. Like, I like Deepwind Gorge, and I like Temple of Kotmogu, and I like Silver Shard Mines. Not very much, really, if I'm
going to be excited to do them when I don't have to deal with a legendary questline.
Yes, definitely that. And I also think that, like, those battlegrounds have been, particularly Temple of Kotmogu and Silver Shard Mines, have been really damaged by people being forced into them who don't want to do them, who don't like them, who don't like PvP, who don't know how. Like, I mean, like, I'm not saying that everyone who PvPs doesn't know how to PvEs doesn't know how to PvP, but, like, if you don't like doing something, you're not going to put much effort into being good at it, you know? It's, like, it's hard to do that if you really don't like something, and I think that those battlegrounds have kind of suffered from having people in there.
Yeah, it's really strange that you have to go in there when the legendary cape effect is disabled in that sort of environment. It's like, it doesn't really fit into... it doesn't really make logical sense why you're doing this if it's a purely PvE raid buff cape.
Completely agree. And I'm really looking forward, like Perk says, to seeing those without those people in there who don't want to be there. Like, I'm not saying stay out of my battlegrounds. I'm just saying I'm looking forward to you guys not being forced into doing this.
You guys don't want to be there, so
exactly. Everybody's happy. And I mean, I think the new maps are cool, but I think that new maps take a long time for the general player base to learn and to really become comfortable in. So I'm fine with not having new battlegrounds at launch. Like, I would be really happy to see them introduce some new battlegrounds later on in the expansion, perhaps a new arena map even.
Wasn't it Wrath of the Lich King? It didn't launch with a new battleground, but then halfway through we got Isle of Conquest.
Precisely,
and that was really fun.
Yeah, exactly. And like, it's happened before, so I would be totally happy to see that happen again. I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. And I honestly think that there's so much other stuff going on. They spent so much time on Ashran. And having done it on the beta, like, I ranted about this a couple of episodes ago. It's really fun. Ashran is really good fun. And I would swap like 2 or 3 battlegrounds for Ashran. I would be totally fine with that. So I'm not fussed about this at all. Like, I'm not surprised either. So I think it's fine. The The final question comes from someone whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce. I'm sorry, I can't read Cyrillic, but their Twitter name is Left-Hander. So let's go with that. So apologies, Left-Hander, for not really having a stab even at pronouncing your Cyrillic character name, but I can't. But he asks, will we have the opportunity to change our outpost buildings and do their quest chains, or at least change the garrison ability in zones? Now, you touched on this earlier, Poe, so you know the answer to that.
So, well, most of it. I know that in the Grand, I completed this long quest line, and when I was finished, I was able to pay the NPC 10,000 gold to switch the building from a stables to a gearworks. Now, I wasn't given an alternate quest series to do, but I was able to switch the building, have my outpost, look completely different, and get a different zone-wide buff.
Right. So you were able to get the buff, you were able to change the building, but you weren't able, at this point at least, you weren't able to redo the quest line for the new building.
And I mean, there were some bugs in Nagrand, so I don't know if there's a quest bug there, and we'll obviously keep making characters and trying.
Yeah.
But it seems right now that there is some sort of customization. We're just not sure how much there is at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of like it would be surprising. I suppose it would be nice for people to be able to, particularly for those who are real completists, to be able to go back and build another building and then do the associated quest line. But it might be a bit odd and sort of interlinked in the story. Like, we don't know how much that weaves back in with the story. And
right, because your garrison outpost does affect the quest line you do. Like when I was talking about spoilers and Spires of Arak, I believe that was specifically tied to the Garrison story I chose. I'll have to go back and see, but it does affect the choices you make and the followers you do get. So it's like, well, can you go back and do the whole other series and get the follower from the other quest line?
Yeah, and that's a valid question. Like, I can totally imagine, like, we've only seen so many followers in action and sort of quest failure rates and that sort of thing so far. But particularly if you're trying to build a really good follower base for one specific type of thing, it might be valuable to be able to go back and actually get that, that sparring arena, like, sorry, the lumber mill follower or whatever one you missed out on. Like, you'll be really gutted if you're suddenly like, oh no, I did the wrong one in Spires of Arak and now I don't have Bob the Warlock and he's really good for this quest or something. So that could be like a cool thing to see. But the honest answer is we haven't got a full response to that yet. We're going to keep trying, and maybe other zones will let us destroy buildings and redo the quest chain for the other building. But until then, we'll just have to see on that one. But thank you very much indeed for your questions. So this has been episode 4 of Wowhead Weekly. Thank you very much for joining us again. You can follow me on Twitter at Olivia D. Grace. It's right there, so check it out. You can follow Peculiar on Peculiar. It's just above her Nintendo Wii in the corner there. Thank you so much for watching. And obviously, you can follow Wowhead on @Wowhead, and we'd love you to do that. We hit 100K this week, and we're really, really happy about it. Yay! And as ever, you can find out more information about everything we've talked about this week, everything we're going to talk about next week, and just generally everything on wowhead.com. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.